12,000 years ago, on a frozen hillside, a family knelt in the dirt and dug a very small hole. They wrapped something tiny in it, and then they covered it, head to foot, in bright red powder. For 12,000 years, nobody knew he was there. And when we finally found him, he turned out to be the oldest American we have ever held in our hands, and the only one from his entire world that his people buried like this. A baby, covered in red, laid down with more than 100 of their most precious things. This is the story of how the first Americans said goodbye, and why that goodbye might be one of the first truly human things anyone on this continent ever did. Today, death is something we hide. It happens behind hospital doors, in quiet rooms, handled by strangers. Most of us have never touched it. For the first Americans, death happened in your arms. In the camp. By the fire. In front of the children. And what a people does with their dead is one of the only windows we have into what was happening inside their heads. Did they grieve the way you would? Did they believe the person went somewhere? A grave is a fossil of a feeling. And this one has been waiting 12,000 years to be read. In 1968, in Montana, some men were moving earth with heavy machinery at the base of a rocky bluff. And out of the collapsing dirt came stone tools, dozens of them, beautiful ones. And bones, small bones, stained deep red. They had stumbled onto a grave. We call the site Anzac, after the family who owned the land. It took decades to understand what they'd found. Because this, a body, deliberately buried, covered in red ochre, surrounded by tools, is the only burial we have ever found from the Clovis people. The first Americans left us spear points and mammoth bones all over the continent. They left us exactly one child. He was a boy. Barely more than a year old when he died. That was around 12,700 years ago, deep in the Ice Age, when this land still had mammoths on it. His people were Clovis, the first culture to spread right across the Americas, from one coast to the other, in what may have been just a few centuries. They were mammoth hunters, long-distance walkers, tool makers of a kind that would not be matched here for thousands of years. And somewhere in all that motion and survival, a family stopped, because their baby had died. And instead of simply moving on, they did something that took time, and effort, and meaning. First the red. The powder covering him is ochre, iron-rich earth, ground down into pigment. It isn't food. It isn't a tool. It doesn't keep you warm. Grinding it and applying it takes real work, for no survival payoff at all. And yet you find red ochre on the dead in graves all over the ancient world, on separate continents, among people who never met. Red is the color of blood, of birth, of life. And again, humans chose to send their dead into the ground wearing it. Nobody had to teach these families that. Something in us reaches for red when we lose someone. They reached for it too. Then, the things they gave him. More than 100 objects were laid in that grave. Stone blades, spear points, long rods carved from antler. Many of them also dusted in red. And these were not scraps. Some are the finest Clovis tools ever found, the sharpest, the most carefully made, the most valuable things these people owned. Now think about that. You do not give a 1-year-old a set of hunting weapons. A baby cannot use a single one of them. So these tools were not for using. They were for saying something. That this small person mattered. That he was worth the best they had. And here's the detail that stops you cold. Some of those objects were already old when the baby was buried. Not years old. Generations old. A few of the antler rods date to well before the child was even born. Which means these were not fresh tools, made for the funeral. They were heirlooms. Things that had been carried, and used, and kept, handed down through the family for a very long time. They took their ancestors' most treasured possessions and they gave them to their youngest, at the very end. They buried the past with the child who had no future, because that is what a burial really is. They did not just leave the body where it fell. They did not treat him like something used up. They stopped. They dug. They decorated. They gave. That is grief. The same grief you already know. And it is not new. And it is not even only ours. Long before the first Americans, older kinds of humans were burying their dead too, laying them down, sometimes with flowers, with ochre, with care. Grief is older than our species. The instinct to not let go of someone you love without a ritual was already ancient when this baby was born. You did not invent the way you'll feel at a funeral, you inherited it, and a burial tells us something even bigger. To bury someone on purpose, you have to hold an idea in your head that no animal seems to hold. That the body still matters, even when the person is gone. Maybe that they've gone somewhere. That death is not just a stop, but a door. We can't read their minds. We don't get to know what they believed. But the red, the gifts, the care, they all point in the same direction. These were people asking the same enormous question you have asked, lying awake at night. Where did they go? 12,000 years ago, on this continent, someone was already asking it. Now, there's a hard truth underneath all of this. In the Ice Age, a lot of children died. Without medicine, without safety, being very small was the most dangerous thing you could be. Losing a baby was not rare. For most families, it was something you expected to survive more than once. And that could have made death cheap. It could have made them numb. But look at what they did here. They did not treat a common loss as a small one. They gave a 1-year-old the funeral of someone immense. The frequency of death did not lower its price. If anything, it looks like they loved harder, precisely because they knew how easily he could be taken. And then, in 214, this baby did something no one expected. Scientists read his DNA, the whole genome, out of those 12,000-year-old bones. And what it said rewrote the story of an entire hemisphere. This one child is directly ancestral to the vast majority of native peoples living in the Americas today, especially across Central and South America. Not a distant cousin, an ancestor. His family wasn't just one group among many. His family was the founding population, the people that nearly everyone in the Americas descends from. So this is not the grave of some anonymous Ice Age infant. This is, quite literally, the earliest American we can point to and say, your family, their family, the beginning, which is why his story doesn't end in a lab. In 2014, Détesa coincided Poncause. 2014. After the science was done, the descendants came for him. Native families, from the land where he was found, took that little boy back. And they buried him again. With ceremony. With red ochre. In the Montana ground. 12,700 years after his first funeral, his own people laid him down a second time, and grieved a child they had never met, but somehow, still, belonged to. The same land. The same red earth. The same goodbye. A circle that took 12,000 years to close. We spent this whole channel following the first Americans, the ones who feared nothing, who were free, who owned the night, who outlasted the rain. And here, at the very start of all of it, is the thing that shows they were already fully us. Not the spear points. Not the mammoth hunts. This. A family, on a frozen hill, refusing to let a baby go into the dark without red, without gifts, without love. Death didn't make them less human. Burying their dead is one of the first things that ever made them human at all. The oldest American we will ever find is not a hunter, or a chief, or a warrior. It's a child somebody loved enough to bury like a king. So, what would you want left beside you, at the end? Tell me in the comments. And the first 5 chapters of their story are waiting.